Welcome back to Left, Right and Centre. Our other big focus tonight, despite reports of interventions by the Reserve Bank of India, the rupee tanked to an all-time low to close the day at 60.72 against the dollar. The rupee declined amid growing concerns over heavy capital outflows. The stock markets mirroring the rupee slide. The Sensex shedding 77 points to end the day at 18,552. Well, the rupee has already been the worst performing currency in Asia. It's now the second worst in emerging markets as well, after the South African rand. Well, we're asking tonight, the rupee sinks to 60.72 to the dollar. Just where is this going to end? Joining us on that discussion tonight, Sajjid Chinoy, Chief Economist of JP Morgan India, NK Singh, former member Planning Commission, as well as Rajya Sabha member, and MK Venu, Executive Editor of The Hindu. Sajjid Chinoy, let me begin with you. Can we blame this only on the US Fed suggesting withdrawal of stimulus, or is there an inherent weakness in our system?
Well, both things can be true. Prima facie, much of this weakness in emerging market currencies over the last 2 months has been precipitated by worries that excessively loose monetary accommodation by the US Fed is finally going to come to an end. This is the beginning of the end of easy money as we know it. But what this ultimately reveals is just how vulnerable countries like India are. We have a $90 billion current account deficit last year, perhaps a similar amount this year. Of which only about 25 billion is financed through foreign direct investment. So we are very vulnerable because we're so dependent on this hot money, so to speak, these portfolio flows that move in and move out as global risk changes. So at some level, it reflects our vulnerability. At the moment, we need $7-8 billion of new money every month to finance our current account deficit. Right. When you actually have a capital outflow of $5-6 billion like we've seen over the last 2 weeks, that can put excessive pressure on the currency.
NK Singh, do you see this as a real panic situation? I mean, in a sense, the withdrawals have just begun. This is possibly just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, I think that in all panic, there is also an opportunity, because I think that experience has proved that Indian policymakers only act under a crisis. This crisis, driven by both exogenous and endogenous circumstances, now needs a structural correction. And I do believe that the policymakers would take the hint that bipartisan support and strong bipartisan support is necessary for important macroeconomic corrections. The fiscal deficit continues to loom large. The current account deficit continues to be a matter of continuing worry, and the structural reforms have yet to take off, which would enable the economy and the economic growth momentum to pick up significantly enough to be able to once again reignite investor confidence.
Where do you see this level, sir?
Large inward capital flows.
Where do you believe that, at what level does this kind of government intervention or central bank intervention become critical? Has that moment already arrived?
Well, frankly speaking, I would strongly advocate against mindless intervention against market sentiment. Past experience of other countries have proved that if the government intervenes, and let's not forget that our reserves are not all that much, we have comfortable reserves, but our reserves are not as mind-boggling as reserves of countries, for instance, like China and so on. So I think that we need to be careful in calibrating the response. We need to prevent excessive volatility of the currency movement. At the same time, we cannot act against the market sentiment. And I think it would be a wrong decision if we run down our reserves too rapidly in order to support a preferred exchange rate. Instead, I think what it augurs is that we need to act now without further delay in undertaking necessary macroeconomic corrections, and more importantly, the important legislations which would signal the beginning and reigniting investor confidence. What we need is large inward capital flows of direct foreign investment, even in the short term.
Where are these reform measures? We've been hearing them promised for a while now, but where and how is investor confidence going to be restored in the Indian economy?
See, NK was saying that we need to do structural reforms. Now, structural reforms is a medium-term to long-term affair. It's a longer-term project. But what the government can immediately do is to just announce, just to improve sentiment, just announce some of the big foreign investment reforms that they've been talking about. I've been seeing in the papers foreign direct investment reforms, liberalizing them in areas like insurance, like defense, etc., where there's no harm in just going out and just saying that yes, we are open to more investments. And as Sajjid said, FDI is a stable form of inflow. So just keep announcing various pending reforms in order to attract stable inflows. We are vulnerable on some of the hot money.
So long-term capital, you say.
Yeah, I would also say, Ankita, that in the past RBI has whenever speculators, speculators love this situation, and in India there is a huge what is called non-deliverable forward market, $40 billion out of Singapore. People are punting on the rupee out of Singapore, Dubai, etc. And in the past RBI has strongly intervened, called all the foreign banks and told them to not to sort of encourage this kind of punting outside of India. Now, some of those measures purely as a short-term thing, the RBI can undertake. RBI has its ways of telling the banks not to indulge in some of these some of these speculative activities outside.
Right.
So these are all par for the course. I think by now the government should have done it, and I personally believe that the currency. A lot of people are saying 62. Some people are saying 63. This is all idle speculation, and I feel that rupee is fairly valued at about, I would say, about 58, 59, and I have no doubt in my mind that if some of these measures are taken, it will equally rapidly go back to about 58, 59.
Well, that seems to be a fairly optimistic scenario. Yes.
Ankita, I think that Venu, there are back of the envelope calculations that the embedded inflation has not been adequately reflected at rupee at 58, 59. And I think that the people are therefore talking in terms of where the rupee is now more or less reached to be the real effective exchange rate as compared to the other methodologies of calculation. But I want to take you on, Venu, on something else. I think that whereas there is no doubt that anti-speculative measures and actions by the Reserve Bank would be helpful in preventing needless speculation on the rupee, I do believe that the time has come for really strong bipartisan signal that India has understood the message of the serious economic difficulties we are in, and we are willing to take corrective steps which would encourage long-term FDI flows. Short of that, I do not see really merely talking up the sentiment to be lasting enough.
But conversely, NK Singh, in recent months, have we actually, in a sense, destroyed investor interest in India with, some rather retrograde policies, the Vodafone case in point, in effect?
Couldn't agree with you more, but pursuing that road would be a needless road to pessimism. We need to crawl back. And I think in the effort to crawl back, Ankita, some of these things, I think the government needs to be candid and tell the country, tell political parties that we are in a serious economic situation and we need to take difficult steps if we do not want to traverse the road of 1991 all over again.
Ankita, can I make a small point here? In the last 4-5 years, the Federal Reserve has expanded its balance sheet more than 3 times. From $600 billion, they've gone up to some over $2 trillion. That's the kind of money dollars they've pumped into the. They have debased. It amounts to basically printing money and debasing your currency. Now, it's just the fact that it's a safe haven, considered a safe haven, that the dollar is strengthening. Now, I would want to ask experts, how do they see this kind of debasing of the dollar by printing so much currency? How will this pan out in the medium term?
But a larger question there really, to bring it back to the Indian situation, petrol and diesel prices in particular. Sajjid Chinoy, those are going to be impacted immediately, possibly, in an already inflationary economy. To what extent can we let petrol and diesel prices rise?
We can debate ad nauseum what the causes of the rupee depreciation are. But I think the impact on the macroeconomy can be very significant. There are at least 3 different impacts out here.
Yes.
If you have a 12-13% depreciation of the rupee like we've had in the last 6 weeks, it will definitely have an inflationary impact. Most rules of thumb is for every 10% depreciation, you will see nearly a 1 percentage point increase in the WPI with a lag of 2-3 months. You're going to stress fuel subsidies on the budget. Oil subsidies could rise anywhere between 0.3 or 0.4% of GDP if the rupee is at 60 versus the rupee at 55. And most of all, this could really stress corporate balance sheets. Let's not forget, we have a stock of $115 billion of ECBs. Refinancing every year is about 20-25 billion. A large majority of that is not naturally hedged or not financially hedged. So you've got unhedged balance sheets that corporates are exposed with, and that could take a very significant hit. So the financial stress from a weak rupee could also be meaningful. So this could have, pretty serious macroeconomic consequences and really complicate near-term macro management if this weakness continues to sustain.
All right, I'm afraid we will have to leave it at that for tonight. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on this discussion. That's about it on Left, Right and Centre. Do join us once again tomorrow. That's it then from this team. Stay tuned for The Buck Stops Here, coming up at 9 p.m.